This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. All right, welcome back to the show. I'm Brian Call, and I'm joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
Well, thank you.
All right, getting right back into the story here. We're in the book, Blood and Thunder, the epic story of Kit Carson and the conquest of the American West, written by Hampton Sides. This is a national bestseller. We're deep into the story now where Narbona died.
Didn't they
The guns.
Yeah, he didn't die pretty, and then someone came up and scalped him. Yep.
So yeah, that's where we left off. Pretty ugly situation. We're going to get right back into the story and see what happens next. A little bit of what happens is you're going to learn a little about how the Navajo deal with their dead, which is interesting. You know, everybody has their thing. Okay, here we go.
I don't like them.
The greatest leader of the Navajos had died, but there would be no funeral. The Navajos did not believe in funerals when someone died, even a great eminence like Narbona. The important thing was to get the spirit on its way to the underworld as expeditiously as possible. People did not have any desire to linger around the body to pay their respects. The immediate family would handle the messy details of disposing the corpse and dividing Narbona's considerable possessions. For the many thousands of other Navajos who knew Narbona and the thousands who knew of him, the mourning would be profound, but it would not be public. Shortly after he was killed by Colonel Washington's troops, Narbona's body was brought back to the constellation of hogans that formed his outfit on the great slope of the Chuska Mountains. Hogans are what they live in.
Like a wooden cabin type thing?
No.
Let's find out.
No, it's more like
what's my job again?
A hogan, it's more like, I think, a wooden structure with mud around it, grass, and various things to sort of build a dirt hut.
So I'm seeing it made out of wood, and I'm seeing it made out of it's more of the shape it seems to be.
Well, I think you want to do Navajo hogan to get the real feel, and I think that's really
more the dirt mound.
Yeah, it's more made up of dirt like this.
It's like a dirt igloo.
I mean, you can see lots of pictures of them. It's like a above ground cellar.
Mm-hmm. It would be cool.
But I mean, think about it. They're in a hot desert.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty ideal. It's without having to dig a hole, you know, you build a dirt.
I'm into it.
You know, yeah, it's got to be fairly comfortable.
Everything else in nature digs a hole and makes mud houses. Why not?
So it says that, he returned to the constellation of hogans, or the group of hogans that formed his outfit on the great slope of the Chuska Mountains. Some Navajo accounts say Narbona did not die immediately from his wounds, that although he was mortally injured by Washington's troops and then scalped, the aged headman somehow remained alive long enough to be brought back home, where he was able to bid his wives and children and grandchildren farewell. If so, that's brutal. He was old.
Mm-hmm.
Outside the hogans, the family prepared the old man's corpse for burial. For them, it was a repugnant task, and they went about it quickly, deliberately, alert to any inauspicious signs. Remember how at the beginning, we got into the book that the Navajo are extremely superstitious.
Mm-hmm.
And so the dead freak them out. Spirits, ghosts, all that kind of stuff. It says, as much as they loathed dealing with death, they knew it was important that the body be handled correctly, according to all the old protocols, or else Narbona's ghost might escape the bonds of mortality and come back to haunt them indefinitely. He would prowl around the hogans at night, whistling in the dark, throwing clods of dirt at people and giving them bad dreams, causing loved ones to become crazy or to shrivel and die from some strange sickness. He might shoot corpse powder into someone's head, causing a dire condition that would manifest itself only as a faint bump on the victim's scalp. In Navajo thinking, there was no such thing as a good ghost, no matter how kind or gentle the person might have been when he was alive.
Why? Why does death instantly turn into a butthole?
It's not good to die.
We should introduce him to Casper.
What's crazy is, he'd prowl around at night, whistling.
Why the whistling?
Throwing dirt, clods of dirt, giving people bad dreams.
Hey, I kind of like whistling, depending on the whistle.
This is crazy. Shoot corpse powder into someone's head. What's corpse powder?
I'm assuming a dead body.
There's a thing about it they have. Yeah. If Narbona had simply died of old age, passing happily in his sleep, perhaps, then his family would not have needed to take so many precautions.
He kind of died of old age. If he hadn't been so old, he would have moved faster and he would have survived.
For it was thought that that's so irreverent, Brent. We're talking about a dead man.
Who got scalped like 10 seconds later?
His family would not have needed to be so precautious if it wasn't for the way he died. For it was thought that old people who died of natural causes were incapable of producing ghosts. The same was said of stillborn babies and infants who died during uttering their first cry.
Well, ain't that convenient?
But Narbona had been killed against his will, murdered, in fact, and then scalped.
Most people, I feel, are killed against their will.
And now his people had every reason to fear that his ghost would be angry and vengeful. The old man's wrath would naturally be aimed at the Americans, but since a ghost rarely traveled far from his hogans and the immediate world familiar to him when he was alive, Narbona's own people would bear the brunt of his rage. His family feared visitations of a special fury unless they handled the burial with exactitude. The only fortunate detail about the manner in which Narbona died was it had happened outside. Had he died inside his hogan by whatever cause, the family would either have had to bury him right there in the floor, or else remove the corpse through a hole opened in the north wall. But that was not the end of it. The hogan would then would have had to have been destroyed, razed, and burned, for otherwise it would be considered permanently chindi, or bewitched.
Chindi.
Chindi.
They don't have to salt the earth too? Just burn it all down?
When Narbona was alive, some Navajos had wondered whether
Does it say why the north? Why a hole through the north? Oh, gosh, I feel like I should know that.
When Narbona was alive, some Navajos had wondered whether he might be a witch. At least that was the gossip he had sometimes had to live down. This belief came not from anything Narbona had done or said during his long life, but rather from the simple fact that he was one of the richest men in all of Navajo country, rich in livestock, rich in crops and jewelry and slaves. Some Navajos looked askance at wealth, even as they envied it. And especially among the poorest of the Diné, special speculation often circulated that the only person who could get rich was by learning witchcraft and breaking into tombs to plunder the treasures inside. Yet people who can't win often look at others winning and think, well, the only way they can win is if they cheated to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like,
now that he's gone, I'm going to go find his cheater stick.
Yeah, jealousy is an ugly thing.
Mm-hmm.
Consequently, a wealthy person had to go to great lengths to counteract this suspicion by constantly sharing his largesse, throwing elaborate and expensive ceremonials attended by many hundreds of hungry people. Yeah, you get too rich in a savage world, people are going to come for you. You got to share it, throw it out there, buy people's appreciation. Things haven't changed much. The expectation that rich men would assume their communal responsibilities and bankroll these extravagant feasts and healing gatherings, ritual meetings that formed the public pulse and political blood of Navajo life, worked as an economic leveler, a kind of tax.
Sounds like a wake, but really political.
The custom encouraged simple generosity, but behind it all was a steadfast need to convince a jealous society that one was not a witch.
Is this going to be like some Salem witch trial type crap?
Among the Navajos, there was an old expression. You can't grow wealthy if you treat your relatives right.
Huh. Interesting.
So the only way that that's a really negative saying. It's like that by default, they're saying the only way that you're rich is by screwing everyone around you out of opportunity and being selfish. That's the only way.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically they're saying it's impossible to be rich if you lived how you're supposed to live, instead of the idea that you worked harder, were more talented, and on merit gained more, and still shared. But they're like, no, everybody should be impoverished, or at least like mediocre.
It's like the crab in the bucket.
Narbona's slaves probably performed the most intimate tasks of the body preparation, the abhorrent parts that involved coming in direct contact with the skin. They removed the bloody garments and carefully disposed of them by incineration, for it was thought that a man's blood heedlessly left behind, even a small quantity of it, could be used by a witch for malicious purposes. The attendants then bathed the body and dusted it in corn pollen. The dressed Narbona in his best clothes, the ones he wore to blessing ways, and other ceremonies. Brilliant striped blanket, red as blood and black as night, were draped across him in his shirt, arms jingling in silver bracelets. They dressed him up. Super fancy coral abalone shell. Then they carefully held his scalped head and slipped a feathered helmet over it, so he looked something like the warrior of old. They placed him on several layers of wool blankets and set one of his long sinew-backed bows by his side with a quiver full of arrows. Other personal objects of value, fetishes, fine pottery, a tobacco pipe, might have been laid with him. Wrapping Narbona up tight in the blankets, the attendants then rolled him in a buffalo pelt. The animal's thick matted fur turned toward the body. With some twine made of horsehair, they tied the bundled corpse until the rope was cinched tight in an intricate pattern the Navajos called the death knot. Then,
is it just like tying it really tight like the spool, or are they sewing him shut into it?
You got a
Navajo death knot.
The death knot. Yep. I like how you're giving me these quizzical looks this whole time. Then, in the late afternoon, 2 of Narbona's sons assumed their place in the ceremony. They wore their hair untied, their bodies slathered in a gray film of moistened ashes. They hoisted the body and laid it across the sheepskin saddles of Narbona's 2 favorite horses, a gray stallion and a palomino. Taking a roundabout path, one of the sons led the team slowly on foot while the other son walked alongside, making sure the buffalo hide sarcophagus did not fall off.
Sarcophagus.
Yeah, coffin. Whatever.
Yeah, still. Okay.
Finally, they came to a place called Rock Mesa, and there they found a deep crack. Brent, you got to pay attention to this. They came to a place called Rock Mesa, and there they found a deep crack in the sandstone. The Navajos rarely buried their dead in the European sense because perhaps the rocky soil was often too hard to dig, nor did the Dene follow the tradition of many Plains Indians who tied the body to a high pole or a tree to be picked apart by birds, the spirit of the dead literally taking flight. Instead, the Navajos placed their dead in high caves and crevices in the many hidden folds of their red rock world. Tightly wrapped bundles like the one that now contained Narbona were discreetly stashed throughout the pocked and riddled landscape. Natural catacombs as dry and hard as the skeletons that moldered inside them. The Navajos left no cairns or tombstones, no marks of any kind. They did not want anyone to know where the dead were laid to rest, for fear that their graves might be desecrated by the skinwalkers or by enemies from other tribes.
Bro, could you imagine? The Goonies could have had a much darker story if they would have stumbled upon that, dude.
For the Navajos, the business of burial was to be carried out with a zealous and methodical secrecy. Carefully, Narbona's sons lowered the body into the crevice with ropes until they felt it touch the rock surface below. They tossed down juniper branches and the scrub of Kamasa sage to obscure the bundle. Then a thick dusting of sandy soil. Finally, they covered everything with stones of various sizes and shapes, trying to make the site look natural and inconspicuous.
That's cool.
Smudging out their footprints, they led the palomino and the stallion a ways to the north, the direction in which Narbona's spirit, having shed its shell, would soon be traveling.
Is north where the spirit world is?
Then the 2 men came to a low hill and hobbled the horses and tied them tight, making sure their noses were pointed directly north. And there, right at sunset, Narbona's sons slaughtered the 2 steeds, probably by slitting their throats and clubbing the animals to death. This was an old Navajo custom. Those tasked with the burial were supposed to destroy several prized horses of the deceased right beside the tomb site, not only to honor the dead, but also to ensure that he or she would have something to ride into eternity. Certainly, Narbona's sons wanted their father to go out in style.
This seemed oddly wasteful. I was pretty on board with most of what was going on, a little excessive at some places. Still have questions about the corn pollen, but the horse thumping at the end was a bit much.
I don't know, man. Makes sense to me. Need a horse if you're going to go a long journey. Making the long journey happier and easier was the least the living could do for the departed loved ones.
The least.
For the afterworld was thought to be an uninviting place, a place of desolation. There was nothing radiant about the afterlife, no joyous reunions with the Maker, no glorious white light. On the other hand, neither did the Navajos have a notion of anything resembling the Judeo-Christian concept of hell. They did not believe they would find fire and torments awaiting them. No angry God would judge them for their conduct here on earth. For them, the spirit world was just a realm of drab melancholy, where souls eventually went and from which they could never escape. There was no hope of reincarnation, no expectation of a return. Once there, the spirit was there forever.
That is a peculiar notion I've never really heard of.
It's not a very noble concept.
You're not going to breed, yeah.
This is your one life. It doesn't really matter how you live it. There's no, real meaning. And you're just going to wander around listlessly. Hopefully you don't become a vengeful ghost and get stuck here forever.
And the spirit world is apparently boring and two-toned.
And you just like drably float around.
It's all sepia-toned.
So, this afterworld was not a theological construct. It was a real place somewhere off in the distant north. And it was said to be located deep inside the ground. Many Navajos believed it was one of the lower realms from which they had emerged as a people long ago, one of the 4 netherworlds where they had evolved as a race of chittering insects. North, of course, was also literally the place from which the Navajos had come. While they did not actually believe they had migrated to the southwest from Canada, in fact, the theory is still not widely accepted among modern Navajos, even in the face of seemingly incontrovertible linguistic, cultural, and DNA evidence. The Dene entertained many dark legends about certain close cousins from the north, from whom they had somehow become separated ages ago. The Navajo, spooked by all things too closely associated with Cardinal North, seemed unsettled by the notion that they might have direct relatives living in that direction.
So hold on, the Navajos believe they're bug people?
Well, it says they evolved as a race of chittering insects. I mean, not all of them. This is said many believed.
Whoa. We might have to end up like making a whole thing about this, Brian. This is crazy. The 4 people, the 2 coyote, the 4 rulers of the sea, the mist beings, the bat people, the air.
Did you find a rabbit hole there, Brent?
Bro, I can't even say these words. Swallow Chief. Yeah, we might have to dip into that at some point. That's just to like understand how, like what they're, where they say they come from. They say, yeah.
The book says there is an extraordinary story about a small delegation of Navajos that was invited to the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. 1893. Okay. They were wandering from one exhibit to the next when they stumbled upon a particular pavilion from Canada that struck their fancy. This exhibit was staffed by Indians who happened to be Athapaskans, and the Navajos, to their astonishment, understood nearly every word these oddly familiar-looking Canadians said. Although they could carry on a perfectly intelligible conversation, the Athapaskans were not happy to see the Navajos. "We split up a long time ago," they warned, "and it is said that if we ever saw each other again, the world would be destroyed." The Navajo delegation was similarly unnerved by the encounter, and for their remaining 3 weeks in Chicago, they never again visited the Athapascan Pavilion. Athapascan Pavilion. If not exactly in Canada, the underworld was nonetheless somewhere in that sinister direction.
I want to know the tea with the Athapaskans.
What's that?
The Athapaskans. What's going on there? Like, something really dramatic happened, that those people split apart, and then started telling their kids, if you ever run into your cousins again, the world is going to end. Some crap went down.
What's funny is the underworld was nonetheless, if not exactly in Canada, the underworld was nonetheless somewhere in that similar direction. Right now with Trudeau there, it's definitely like,
I was going to say,
like
bro,
hell.
It's a snowy butthole of a place.
To get there, I love you Canadians, but
I hate snow.
You guys have it. Your leader. To get there, Narbona's spirit would have to wind down a long, narrow mountain trail with many switchbacks. Near the bottom of the trail stood a rippled sand dune, at the base of which he would be greeted by deceased kinfolk who looked just as they had when they were alive. His relatives would guide him on a gloomy trek lasting 4 hard days, standing at the gates of the afterworld, vigilant guardians would put Narbona through a series of trials to determine if he was actually dead. Hey, the Greek have some weird ideas. The Romans,
I
like
get
everybody,
it, but it's not like
pretty pagan.
What's he doing, Brian? Going to break into heaven?
I mean,
they don't have a heaven. They already said that.
The Vikings have some weird Valhalla. Come on, dude.
Fighting to the death every day and then feasting. I can get behind that to an extent.
Narbona's sons believed the old man was already on his path. You've gone away from us now, they chanted. You've gone away by yourself. Having slaughtered the horses and left them on the ground, the two men then ripped the saddles and bridles into shreds so they could not be used by anyone who happened to pass by. Back to that waste. They may have also followed the old custom of hurling the ruined tack up high in a tree. Similarly, whatever tools they had brought with them to perform the burial, an axe, a digging stick, a shovel perhaps, were also destroyed and strewn among the rocks. The Navajos took care to obliterate everything involved with the funeral, as though it had never happened at all. They also obeyed a converse taboo. They were not allowed to break sticks or the other objects idly, or to destroy any kind of disused property, or even chop wood at night, for the fear of this might be taken as a disrespectful imitation of funeral behavior.
That's a lot.
You imagine, I can't chop wood, dude. The ghosts might think I'm disrespecting.
Yeah.
I'm faking a funeral. Yeah.
That just seems like a lot of steps.
Also, the loud snapping and ripping sounds would be extremely vexing to any spirits that might be lurking around. Narbona's sons then broke into a run, jumping over the scrub and taking erratic paths so no evil spirit could catch them. Around dusk, they made a small fire in a sheltered place that enjoyed a commanding view of Rock Mesa. There, they stayed for 4 nights, fasting and chanting songs. During the day, they remained in the same place, watching over the mesa and thinking about their father, while observing a strict silence, communicating only by sign language.
Ugh.
It outrun the ghosts.
What are they? Okay. This amount of like excess and this time being spent. Okay. One guy. Now, what if there's like 20 or 30 dudes you got to do this for?
It must have been difficult for the two men to concentrate on the vigil, knowing as they did that a large force of foreigners, the same people who had killed their father, was even now penetrating deeper and deeper into Navajo land, heading for the heart of their country. Narbona's sons must have burned with hate, must have wondered whether they should be taking up arms against these invaders, the Americans. Their own country was under attack, and yet here they were, staring in silence at Rock Vista. But they knew they could not take shortcuts in the burial ritual. They never separated from each other, not even for a minute, for they did not want some evil force to come between them. Until the rituals were complete, they felt they were in mortal danger of spiritual infection, and they had to help keep each other strong. Even when one of them had to relieve himself, the other son would go along. After 4 nights, they were satisfied that Narbona's spirit had reached the underworld and that their father could no longer hear their chants and prayers, so the next morning the two sons headed for home. On the north bank of the Rio Tunicha, still a good ways from their village, they encountered a mound of rocks that must have been made them smile. Prior to leaving on their funeral errand, they had asked their wives to bring fresh clothes and hide them beneath a rock pile in just this spot. Now here it was, and they were relieved to know they could finally strip out of their dirty, death-tainted clothes. They
have to burn those too?
Well, Brent,
probably.
They constructed a sweat lodge and built a fire and heated river rocks in the coals. They crawled inside the close structure, placing the glowing stones and a small pit in the center of the dirt floor. They poured ladles of river water on the rocks so that they sputtered and hissed, and then sent up radiant waves of steam. All day and all night they sat and baked in the smarting heat. They wanted to wash off the contamination of death to make themselves clean again.
I like saunas. I've done the sweat lodge thing a couple times. It's interesting.
I was in Japan for a couple of years. We did that there too.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, the men buried their clothes and put on fresh leggings and shirts their wives had left for them, purified. Their unpleasant but unnecessary task behind them, they crossed the river and walked toward the smoking breakfast fires of their distant hogans to eat and drink and sleep among their people. Their hearts were turned away from mourning and fixed upon a new emotion now. Vengeance. So yeah, there you have it. A little bit of how they handle the dead. What do you think?
It's a bit excessive. There were some things I still have some questions. I'm gonna have to look up the corn pollen.
Mm-hmm.
Is it supposed to be like some kind of like sanctifying or some kind of cleansing?
Yeah. Crazy, huh?
Mm-hmm.
The whole thing's interesting, though, just to hear how another culture and how other human beings interpret death, theological, like,
Yeah, why the North?
it's where they came from, it says.
So they came from, oh, that's right. They came from lower worlds. That's right.
But it just says they came from the north, too. It's like symbolizes two things, possibly. While Narbona's sons were burying their father, the Washington expedition had continued on into the labyrinth known as Canyon de Shelly. Look that one up. Canyon de Shelly. North Americans had never penetrated this fabulous carved maze, and no records were left by Spanish explorers, describing it as a fearful chasm, a place of awesome grandeur. It was widely believed that the Navajos had built an enormous citadel down in the canyon's recesses, like big city castle.
It's like just like
wild, huh?
Square.
Yep, it's cool.
Square canyons, like sheer, like that's wow. That's a corner, bro.
Mm-hmm.
Like of a building.
Yeah,
like
that cliff.
Yeah, that's
just a canyon. Sheer walls.
Mm-hmm.
It said that they felt like they had to go all the way in if they were going to stop the Navajo, but the Canyon de Shelly had an aura of impregnability.
It's Canyon de Shelly is also one of the places that's got one of those those
cities,
one of those 7 or 8 cities. Yeah,
but whatever name the canyon, because there's lots of different ideas of its real name. It's really several interconnected chasms running nearly 100 sinuous miles in length. It was one of the most splendid landscapes in the American West. Not as deep as the Grand Canyon, but in its own scaled down way, incredible. What's more, it was a rock wilderness with a human pulse because it did not have a mighty river raging through it, but rather a gentle stream percolating beneath its sandy floor. The canyon had long supported culture with farming and domesticated animals and huddled lodges tucked safely among its myriad notches and alcoves. Before the Navajos took up residence there some time around 1600, Canyon de Shelly had been continuously inhabited by various other Indian groups for more than 2,000 years, including and especially the Anasazi.
That sounds like a really neat ecosystem.
The entire length of it was strewn with ruins, many of them precariously situated on high ledges. In some places, the canyon's sheer fluted walls rose nearly 1,000 feet from the alluvial floor, and everywhere, painted and pecked and patiently scratched high on the luminous gold rock, could be found the art of the ancients. So, like you said, it has lots of ruins and ancient people before that were there, and yeah. James Simpson, thrilled at the possibility of being the first American to map and describe Canyon de Shelly, he was intent to make a study of the fabled Navajo Presidio, as he put it, and to puncture the mythology that surrounded the place. The Kern brothers were excited too, for they had been around Santa Fe long enough to hear the stories about Canyon de Shelly. Since no artist, Hispanic or Anglo, had ever captured it on canvas, no one in New Mexico seemed to have the vaguest idea what the canyon looked like. After having stumbled with Simpson on the extraordinary ruins of Chaco, Richard Kern recognized how lucky he was to be heading only a few weeks later for another untouched wonder. Lugging their cases of oils and charcoals and sketchbooks, the Kerns itched to get to work. John Washington aimed to find the Navajo fortress and, if necessary, lay siege to it, and then sign a treaty with any Diné leaders who would present themselves for counsel. He insisted, on a mission of peace, not war. But he seemed to have no notion of the recent slaying of Narbona, how it might sour the possibilities of a warm Navajo reception. Washington apparently had nothing to say about the Narbona incident, and certainly he showed no sense of regret. In his brusque report on the expedition written upon his return to Santa Fe, he would emphatically declare good riddance upon the Navajo leader's passing. He wrote, "Among the dead of the enemy left on the field was Narbona, head chief of the nation, who had been a scourge to the inhabitants of New Mexico for the last 30 years. Well, he's not wrong.
Yeah,
he's not wrong.
He's not wrong, but there's a little nuance there, I feel.
I mean, not that the Spanish weren't absolutely evil to the Navajo either. Yeah.
They're invaders, invading.
Both ways.
Mm-hmm.
They did heinous things to each other in the story of man. So it says that Washington failed to grasp the mistake his troops had made in their first encounter with the Diné. They had met and then promptly killed and mutilated the most eminent Navajo alive, and quite possibly the one man who could have brought about an accord with the United States. That's called arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
An opportunity was not only missed, it was scarcely even perceived, and then in an instant it was gone. One Navajo man who peacefully approached the Washington expedition on its march indicated through a translator that Narbonne's death had caused much turmoil among his people. The man claimed he had a cousin who was dying from a gunshot wound sustained in the same fracas that had killed Narbonne. It is regrettable, the Navajo said, that so much damage has been done, and we have lost our greatest warrior, all for so trifling a thing as a horse.
Mm-hmm.
With Narbonne slain, the young warriors were angry, and impatient men like Manuelito, is that his son-in-law? Manuelito, who had no use for accommodating these arrogant foreigners. Washington's mission to secure peace had thus ensured its opposite. Now there was a new war. Now, instead of just being at war with the Mexicans, they were also at odds with the Biligana.
It probably wasn't even that great of a horse to begin with.
The Washington expedition, blind to the trouble it left in its wake, marched blithely toward Canyon de Shelly. Predictably, Lieutenant Simpson hated the parched and arroyo-riddled Chusca Valley through which the soldiers passed. Reading his journal, one can almost see him squinching his nose in distaste. The country is one extended, naked, barren waste, he wrote. Everything was dead and lifeless. The soil and it's an all-pervading, dull yellow buff color. This land, he declared, was under a curse. I love that place.
I was just saying, man, it's all about that worldview.
They all seem to not appreciate the country. It says the desert was an unfamiliar and furthermore uninviting world to most Anglo sensibilities. It says most of them, their idea of beautiful land was never far removed from valuable land, and valuable land was any that could be used. The ones from back east who tended to hold more sentimental notions about scenic beauty were in the thrall of a landscape aesthetic that had been passed down from European romanticists and filtered through New England artists such as the painters of the Hudson River School. They were used to finding beauty in greens and blues and mountain streams, plunging waterfalls, sailboats, and flowery meadows full of fat cows.
Yep. It's a different kind of pretty, though, but it is pretty.
Yeah. This landscape was one of upheaval and bright finality, forged in an unforgiving furnace. If the Great Plains was regarded as the Great American Desert, as it was often labeled on maps, then this stark realm was Hades of itself.
Is what itself?
Hades
itself?
Mm-hmm. Hades itself. The scale of it dwarfed a man not only spatially, but also chronologically. It suggested gulfs of time that mocked human relevance in the terror of creation. A good Episcopalian and future deacon, who doubtless believed his maker had fashioned the world in 6 consecutive days, not very long ago, Simpson could not understand this land's logic, let alone declare it lovely. Even the sketches and lithographs done by the Kern brothers show an awkward uncertainty about how to render the Navajo countryside. The scales and proportions often seemed slightly off. The perspectives cramped, the foliage unmistakably eastern. They were Pennsylvanian artists. Buff was no color for a country, Simpson apparently said. It was as though they lacked the retinal nerve that allowed them to see the land for what it was. They were used to Douglas fir and forests. In the desert, the lieutenant was learning the flora and fauna changes dramatically, with even modest gains in elevation. That's so true. One level, it's just dirt, and then some cactuses, and then you get a little higher, and it's like bushes and trees and grass. You go a little higher, and it's like 50-foot trees and real like huge trees, like a
weird.
Yeah, that's how the desert is, like in Sonora, like just 100 feet in elevation, and another 100 feet, another. It's like that's how little you have to get in elevation for there to be a dramatic change in the foliage. The men of the expedition camped beside a clear, swift stream where they drank pure, wholesome water and spotted to their amazement a grizzly bear.
Well, it's a good thing they got guns, right?
Lieutenant Simpson was thrilled by the towering pines and firs, the oak, the aspen, and the willow, and bordering the streams, the hop vine loaded with its fruit. Crazy how they're in the desert and then they're there with like oak and aspen trees and willow. I mean, where there's water, there's life, more life. There were flowers rich in color and profusion and of every hue and delicacy. Upwards of 90 varieties were picked up. the wild rose being among them.
Hold on. What state are we in right now?
Arizona.
Grizzlies in Arizona?
Mm-hmm. Grizzlies all across the West. When I was in Sonora, there's bears.
Did not know that.
Bears tend to, I mean, you got to realize, like, they're not in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the areas, the pockets where there's life, you know. He was surprised and relieved to behold a rich, well-timbered, and sufficiently watered country, a thing I have not seen since I left the confines of the United States. So look up Canyon de Shelly and see if you can see foliage or what it looks like. You can see the location. It should tell you the location too, but you're talking, you know,
There's some greens.
Arizona. It's incredible. I mean, when you think of the Grand Canyon as well, what it looks like on the rim versus down in the bottom and in certain pockets, you know, and various elevation changes, look how green it is. I mean, when you're used to, it's unbelievable. It looks gorgeous. It's like something out of a, you know, like an alien planet. It says that they had to go, they were kind of going through the same passes that the Spanish tried to go with their weapons a long time ago. Gorgeous. Wow. Something out of a Western right there. It says that it was the only practical way to ascend these imposing mountains was through this narrow pass winding up that had been there for centuries, and it was a well-trod highway of the Dene as well. Colonel Washington pronounced it the most formidable defile I have ever seen. His artillerymen and their animals struggled to pull the mountain howitzers through the tight space. Realizing that they were dangerously exposed, the soldiers marched in fear of a Navajo attack from the high cliffs. Richard Kern wrote that a fight was expected. At nearly every point, stones can be rolled on the passers-by. Pueblo Indians who served as Washington's scouts were so worried about an attack, according to Simpson, they reached into their medicine bags and rubbed warriors' herbs upon their heart, and they said to make it a big and brave.
Warriors' herbs.
Yeah, to make their heart big and brave. And periodically, they'd spot Navajos watching them. The Navajo strongly associated with this place with Narbona, for this was called Narbona Pass, where in 1835 the great leader's warriors routed 1,000 Mexicans in a well-executed ambush. Lieutenant Simpson naturally did not know the Navajo history of this place, but to his thinking, it was the sort of distinctive landmark that cried out for a name. In his journal, Simpson decided to pay his commander an eternal compliment by calling the defile Pass Washington, and he put it on the map. If renaming is the first act of conquest, then Simpson had struck his a lasting blow. The new place name stuck, and today, this deep cleft in the Chuska Mountains, Narbona's old stomping ground, is known as Washington Pass.
You think so? You think people call it Narbona's Pass?
And the irony is not lost on the Navajo. I think Narbona's Pass is way cooler than Washington.
Yeah, but you know, people probably wouldn't be able to pronounce it. Narbona.
It says they continued up that path, and Simpson just kept marking up the map and giving everything new names, and
just having fun with it,
and they're still there today.
Wow, lovely conquerors, man.
Yep. On the backside of the Chuskas, the Washington expedition saw no Navajos for several days, but detected fresh signs of their presence. The Navajos were deft at disappearing and lived in a country riddled with good hiding places, concealed caves, box canyons, high mesas reached by inscrutable paths in the sandstone. Clearly, Navajos far and wide had been forewarned of the expedition's approach, and they had scattered with scarcely a trace. There was something eerie about how completely they had their belongings had vanished from the scene. Warriors and women and children and even their herds all gone, leaving nothing but vacant hogans and strewings of sheep dung.
Dang. Pop smoke and got out of there, dude.
In their journals, they wrote about how much sign there was of livestock and how many they had moved when they disappeared. At night, however, Navajos in small parties were seen and heard, or at least sensed, by Washington soldiers. The Americans knew they were being watched, could almost feel the bore of Navajo stares. Several times their pack animals mysteriously disappeared in the night. When it came to livestock, the Dene were incorrigible. Animal theft was the provocation that had brought the American army into their midst in the first place, and, of course, it was a stolen horse that had got Narbona killed. Yet the temptation was irresistible. They kept on stealing, or tried to, yards from Washington's sentries. The Navajos had no qualms about robbing from the Americans. They had many cases to be angry at these invaders. They didn't belong there. They were grazing on everything nearby. After 3 more days of determined marching, they found themselves at the silty mouth of Canyon de Shelly. Here, the stone margins of the canyon were scarcely higher than a man, and the soft floor was broad and flat, but it was sheared rock faces on the sides. Water braided through the canyon, yet most of the flow was subterranean, oozing just a few inches beneath the sand. They had to be careful they didn't fall through. It's got quicksand. They dug holes for water about 5 feet deep, and then they filled their buckets with turbid brown liquid, which they made potable by repeatedly straining through linen cloth until it was tolerably clear. As they pushed deeper into the canyon, the expeditioners began to realize that Navajos were watching them from every ledge and outcrop. They said the enemy is hovering over us. Mm-hmm. Simpson found the site of the burning lodges. It says it was exciting to see the huts of the enemy, one after another, springing up into smoke and flame, and their owners scampering off in flight. So it looks like he ordered his troops to set fire to the Hogans in his path.
Of course he did.
Yet the torching may have had its desired effect. The following morning, 2 Navajos came into camp and consented to talk. One of them, who went by the Spanish name Martinez, wore a great blue coat made of blankets and called himself absurdly the principal chief of the Navajos.
The principal chief. What does that mean?
That's what he called himself, the main chief. And then it says, tell the chief, they're having this conversation, the stolen property, which the nation is required to restore, is 1,000 head of sheep, 34 head of mules, 19 head of horses, and 78 head of cattle. When can the chiefs collect here to make a treaty with me? The interpreter. He says the day after tomorrow. Washington, tell him that if they do not enter into a treaty in good faith, it will result in their destruction. And the interpreter, his people will do all that they're promised. He bowed effusively, and Chief Martinez and his companion bid the colonel adieu. Then Colonel Washington was visited by a Mexican captive of the Navajos, and he was 30-year-old man who had been kidnapped between 17 years earlier.
Dang.
So when he was 13, he had been a boy herding sheep in a field on the outskirts of Santa Fe when the Navajos came spearing out of the west, whisked him away with his flock. He thought that he had come to petition Americans to take him home, and that he was going to be excited to be away from his Indian captors.
Mm-hmm.
Several Mexican volunteers on the expedition had apparently recognized the young man, and they wanted to bring him home to his family. But to their disbelief, and then to their frustration and fury, this son of Mexico wanted to remain a savage here in a heathen land. This was his home now, the man insisted. Bright and energetic, he spoke and carried himself well and dressed like a native-born Navajo. His Spanish had grown thick and faltering. He did not wish to be restored to his own people, said Simpson. He wrote in mild consternation. Indeed, he did not as much as ask about his friends living in Santa Fe.
That's crazy. You see that?
17 years.
Yeah,
you're kidnapped as a teenager, and then you grew up 17 years, the most formidable years. From 14 to 30.
Yeah,
you're not Mexican anymore, dude.
Yeah.
And back then, if you didn't have some means of wealth, I think you're much better off living as a Native American in those days than you were as a European. And without
quality
wealth,
of life.
Yeah, I think you were far healthier and happier as a Native American living than you were as a struggling farmer that was poor on the east, side of things. Like,
I'd be a coal miner.
I don't know, and die young. So what we're going to get into, they're just getting closer and closer to a confrontation, right? It's like, okay, what's going to happen now? Because they're deep in the area, and we're getting to the actual chapter called Blood and Thunder.
Ooh.
What's interesting is, they've been coming through, and they kind of talk like they're going to get along and make things work, but they're not. The Americans are just like, our way or the highway. We want everything, really the sun, the moon, the stars. And we're just looking for you to say no so we can then just teach you some humility. And the Americans, they just don't understand what they're up against either. Both parties don't really get it.
Mm-mm. How can they?
Yeah.
They have no concept of one another and no reference.
We are coming to another intense part of the story. But I think it was important I wanted people to hear about the beautiful country, also how, the Navajo people and how they handle the dead, and how this thing is kind of unfolding. You see two cultures, two different worlds colliding. And anyway, I know how the story ends, but you don't. So
thanks.
It gets wild. It gets pretty interesting. And so far we're reading this whole story and there's no Kit Carson, right?
Next to no. And
and the subtitle of this is The Epic Story of Kit Carson and the Conquest of the American West. So far we've seen how Carson was a major part of the events that unfolded to the conquering of Santa Fe, California, and so on. But here we are with this Navajo issue. Obviously, it seems, if you're wondering where Carson plays a role, Washington seems to be handling it on his own. Does he not? Maybe.
Seems to be.
Well, we'll see.
Heavy-handed, but...
So we'll get into that on the next episode. All right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle.
Go to
your grandpa.
Hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.